Welcome to Uncolored. I'm Kevin Metcalf, and we're going to continue on with Dr. Rasmussen's book this time, How Reason Can Lead to God. I got off track a little bit because I I got sucked into that rabbit hole. I did a couple of videos earlier than this on Calvinism, only because I don't think it's a very good idea, and it's not enough for me just to say it's not a good idea. I need to give you the reasons why I think it's not a good idea. And I'm not saying I'm right and everybody else is wrong. I'm simply giving you my justification why I think that it's not a bad idea. The reason I did that was it was more of a comprehensive view because I probably have maybe one or two other things to say about it in a more comprehensive sense. But I really just want to use it just as an example when I'm comparing good ideas and how those ideas are talked about and asserted and propagated, and how bad ideas are talked about and asserted and propagated, because I think there are two very distinct ways to do that. So I simply was just laying the groundwork there, but I do want to get back to Dr. Rasmussen's book. The reason I'm doing that, and really the whole channel, is about just ideas and how can you construct a worldview, which is basically just a set of ideas that you think accurately maps the world. Well, how can you do that where you can have the ideas that make up this model of the world contain far more good ideas than bad ideas? I don't know if you can have a perfect worldview, but you can at least have a worldview that at least the most essential ideas are very, very good ideas. And I think that makes it easier to construct a worldview that has mostly good ideas and not a worldview that has really bad ideas. For me, the number one starting with that is the idea that God is real. As a matter of fact, that's really the foundation for this whole big idea lens that I look at the world through, is that there are really just two ideas. God is real, and then the other idea would be God is not real. That would be the second idea that I call. And I think that every idea that you have could be traced to one of those two ideas. And it doesn't mean that people who believe that God isn't real only have bad ideas. It's not what I'm saying. I'm simply saying that eventually your idea will trace ultimately to the fact that God is real, which I think makes it a good idea. Or it's going to eventually trace back to the idea that God doesn't exist, which I think it makes it a bad idea in the sense that there's no foundation for your idea. For example, if you're a materialist, then there is no explanation for how the world began. There's no explanation for things like objective moral values. There's no explanation for love and those kinds of things because there's a materialistic, mechanistic reason for everything. I think if you add to that mechanistic reason that God is real, I think it opens up a whole new world of ideas that better explain reality than just materialism. That's kind of what I'm saying. So the goal is how do you get that kind of a worldview that works? Well, I think you have to pick the ideas that are the best ideas, which means how do you determine which is a good idea and which is a bad idea? And I think there's a way to do that. Now, one thing that I came across just this past week, I picked up a new book. It's William Dembski is one of the authors. And I think as a collection, it seems to be a collection of different authors writing about the supposed conflict between science and faith. It's like a comprehensive thing on this topic. One of the ideas in there was this idea of a minimalist approach to ideas. And the point was that it's like if you're going on a trip, okay, you don't only take the things that you actually need. You don't take a bunch of, 4 or 5 bags of stuff that you might use, you may not use, that kind of stuff. Just take the things that you need. And if you do that, then you have a less chance of having a conflict between what you believe and the way the world really works. Now, they're really putting forth this idea in this particular book on the context of faith and science. Because there are some people who believe that God is real and are scientists, but reject ideas like the world or the universe is 15 billion years old, 14 and a half. I don't know what the exact number is. But they reject that because these particular group of Christian scientists, not all of them, but just there's a group of them, who believe that because of, I don't know, something in the Bible, genealogy or something like that, that the world or the universe can only be several thousand years old, 610, I'm not sure what the number is. Well, the minimalist idea says, look, you don't need to take that idea of how old the earth is from the Bible literally, right? It's not really necessary. You can understand who God is and you can understand the world without digging your feet in on that particular idea because, well, in fact, if I understand correctly, the Bible really never says anything about how old the earth is or how old the world is or the universe is in general. It really didn't say anything about that. This is something that certain people have cobbled together, I think, from the genealogies in the Bible. And so the minimalist approach simply says, just leave that out. Don't pack that. Don't take that on the trip. You don't need that. There's certain things that you do need that are well established. Just take those things. And if you do that, then you're less apt to have a conflict with discoveries in science. But it also works the other way too. So if you're going to be a materialist and say the only thing that exists is matter and energy, well, now you're going to have a problem with things like, again, morality, right, wrong, good and bad, the duality of the soul and the body. You know, what is a mind? Well, you have to reject that they have minds and say everything comes from neurophysical, activity and nature. And those theories just don't work. But if you're committed to these ideas in science, then yeah, you have to block out a large part of reality that we all experience. And so the minimalist idea is saying, listen, just be very minimal. Take the ideas that are true, well established, and don't take it any further than that. And you're less likely to have a conflict between what you believe and the way the world reveals itself. And I thought that was a very, very excellent idea. So how does that work? Well, let's look at some what I think are good ideas and bad ideas. And remember, I think that everybody has a responsibility and an ability given by God to construct a worldview, a way of understanding the world that is accurate. And I think that's everybody's responsibility. Some people think, well, this is what my parents thought, or this is what the group of people I like to hang around with think, or this is the country I came from, and this is what... None of that works, in my opinion. None of that suffices. It's up to you as an individual to look at the world and look at reality and see, does what I understand reality work with how the world works? And so this is what I think are the characteristics of good and bad ideas. First of all, I think good ideas are simple, meaning there's not a whole lot of working parts to it. You hear it and you go, oh, okay, that makes perfect sense. There's not a lot to it. Second, I think good ideas are concordant. Now, before I had something here that I called they illuminate. And while I think that's correct, I think concordant is a better way to explain it, because the idea I'm getting at here is that if you have a good idea, it's going to work well with other sets of data. So no matter what you look at in light of this particular idea, it's going to work. It'll make sense. You don't come up to sets of data that just totally don't make sense or can't possibly be real because of this idea you had. So it's in concord with a bunch of other ideas. And that's the idea of illuminating. Not only does it work with other ideas, but there are other ideas that when you look at it in light of this new idea, you go, oh boy, now it really starts to make sense. And other things around it really start to make sense. That's what I mean when I say concordant. And before I had illuminates in there, but that's what I was trying to get at. But finally, I think more practically, it just works. If you have a really good idea, it's something that you can use in the real world, and it's how you treat each other. It's how the world reveals itself. And that's why it's a good idea, because that's how things seem to work. Okay. On the other side, bad ideas, very, very complex. And usually the complexity is unnecessary because it results from the fact that the idea is a bad idea. And so all of these other layers of complexity are to fix the previous layers of complexity that didn't work to begin with. And that leads to the second problem. It's discordant. So you can have an idea about something, and the fact that that other ideas just don't work with it, that's why it's discordant. It's contradictory. Doesn't make sense. If this is true over here, then this can't possibly be true. This idea that you have, probably not the correct idea. Otherwise, it would work wonderfully with it. Bad ideas tend to be discordant like that. And finally, ineffective. I mentioned last time there was a couple of ideas like determinism, like fatalism, both of which I think are bad ideas, only because they just, again, contradict reality, factually, experientially, biblically. I don't think either of those ideas work, and hopefully I illustrated why. But even if they were true, so what? They're useless. Why? Everybody treats each other like we make our own decisions. And we treat each other like our own decisions actually affect the way the world develops. So if I go here instead of going there, there's going to be a different result. If I eat this instead of that, there's going to be a different result. And we all behave as if those decisions are real, they affect the future, and they're coming straight from us. Absolutely no one that I have ever encountered really believes that the world is determined. Pastor, atheist, doesn't matter. That's why it's a bad idea. Even if it's true, it's useless. Doesn't do anything. It's like buying a size 6 shoe when you got a size 11 foot. You wasted your money. So I think bad ideas have that characteristic. Complex, discordant, and ineffective, while good ideas tend to be simple, concordant, and they work. So what's a good idea? Well, I think this thing that Dr. Rasmussen is coming up with or talking about here is a very good idea. And it really deals with this concept of why is there something rather than nothing. And so just to recap what I went through the first few videos I did on the book, just to go back over it. Dr. Rasmussen's idea, he's talking about this question, why is there something rather than nothing? That's the question that he's answering. And I never thought about this until I started looking at this stuff several years ago. But it is a question. There's all this stuff around us, and the question is, why is that? Why are we even here, rather than just nothing at all? And that led to the question that I have no answer for, is this idea of nothingness. Does nothingness even have ontological status? And if it does, and again, I don't have the answer to, or if it does not, then we have two options. Either there exists an infinite series of events that extends all the way into the past, all the way into infinity into the past, or two, there exists something that just simply exists, something that could not fail to not exist. And I think this is the concept that Dr. Rasmussen is getting at, called necessary existence, although he doesn't say this in the beginning. He calls it self-sufficiency. But this is really the whole part of the first 3 chapters. This is where he's getting to. The idea that there is this blob of everything, as he refers to it. And the question is, why is it here, and what sustains it? What keeps it going? Why didn't it just pop out of existence, 2 seconds after it came into existence? And that's really what Dr. Rasmussen is dealing with here in the first 3 chapters of the book. And that leads to this particular problem. So you've got either nothing, this thing that has no ontological status, or you've got everything. And we've got everything that exists. And when I define it, this everything that exists is that any substance that has this property of existence, because that's what he'll be getting into later on in the book, is the property of existence and where you get it from and that kind of a thing. But bottom line is we have this problem. We have everything, right? We don't have nothing. And the question is how did we get into that particular state of affairs? So going to Dr. Rasmussen's book, let's hear how he explains it, because he always does it far better than I ever could. Right here at the bottom, he says, one of the deepest questions anyone can ask is this: why is there anything? We have the power to ask why and how things exist. For example, when we encounter an object of any shape or any size, we can wonder how that object got there. We may extend such questions to groups of objects. Why are there these kittens under my couch? Why are there planets? Why are there solar systems? Why are there galaxies? It's inevitable that people will wonder about the whole show. Why is there anything? In view of the challenge of hard questions like this, some people throw up their hands and say there's no answer. However, if we say there's no answer, then we face the problem of arbitrary, unexplained existence. So again, there are some scientists who go, it's just a brute fact, which is basically them throwing up their arms and going, I don't know. That's whenever I hear a brute fact from scientists, that's them going. That's what I hear. But Dr. Rasmussen thinks that there is an answer to the problem. So now that we know what the problem or what the question is, or the problem, as Dr. Rasmussen says, we have everything, but what's the explanation for it? Before we move on, I want to look at some of the challenges, because this, I think, is key when you develop your ideas. What Dr. Rasmussen does, there was a thread that I was looking at probably a year ago between Dr. Rasmussen and Dr. Alex Pruss, and they were going over some topic. I don't even remember what it is, because after the first couple of back and forths, I totally lost what they were talking about. These guys, they're so smart. So, but what they were doing was they were dealing with objections to an idea that I think they both believed was true. The point I'm making is, just coming up with an idea that you like, that's not even half of the work. Most of the work is dealing with the challenges to your idea. Because again, if you want an idea that again is simple and concordant with all the other sets of data, then you've got a lot of work to do. Because eventually what will happen is if you're walking around with idea A and you think that that's how the world works, one of two things are going to happen. You'll never have a problem with it. Or B, you're going to regularly have the world hitting you in the face with, that's not how it goes. And you can either try and ignore it, or you can actually deal with it and come up with a better idea, which means you're either going to have to toss away the idea that you have or change it so that it can now accommodate this new information. And that's really the most work, I think, when you're trying to work on your worldview and coming up with these ideas that work, is you might have to change some things. But that means taking on ideas that are challenging to your idea. And eventually those are going to come up. So I want to look at, how does Dr. Rasmussen deal with some of these challenges to his idea that we've got this big ball of everything, and there needs to be some explanation for why it's there. So the first objection that we're going to look at, it's in the section, and he usually has this in pretty much every chapter of the book, or every kind of idea that he goes over, the section called Going Deeper, where he deals with the challenges to, some possible challenges to the idea. Not all of them, not comprehensive, but just some of the things that might pop up as you're reading the book. So here's one. It says, some philosophers have proposed that there's no single thing includes all things, that no single thing includes all things. Instead, the universe is a plurality of many small things. The small things do not compose a single big thing. Rather, our universe is just many things arranged in a certain way, just as a flock of birds is not a single thing, so too our universe is not a single thing. The term universe refers to things. Now, why would this be an objection? Because there are some people who challenge the argument with this idea. You don't have to explain the whole universe, because the universe is just made up of a whole bunch of things. You just have to explain the things in the universe, and by explaining the things in the universe, you will explain the whole universe, right? So if I can explain my cup of coffee, my mouse, and all the other things around me, then I will, in effect, explain the whole universe. Like, it's like if you see a flock of birds. Well, if you explain each bird, then you've explained the flock of birds. That's the objection. So you don't need so the objection goes, you don't need an explanation for the whole blob of everything. You just need an explanation for the specific things in the blob of everything. That would be the objection, if I understand it correctly, which I may not. So he goes on. Fortunately, we don't need to pick a fight with these philosophers. Maybe they're right. Then we can say that the totality is nothing more than many individual things. In that case, the blob of everything refers to the plurality of all things rather than to a single big thing. While this distinction between many things versus one big thing is interesting, it makes no difference to the construction of my bridge. Whether the blob of everything is singular or plural, the blob of everything includes all of reality. Now, I thought that was incredibly deft, how he dealt with that objection. He's saying you can have it either way. You can say that there's a whole bunch of little things that make up the universe, or you can say take the universe as a whole thing. Doesn't matter to his explanation, because he's talking about the existence of everything. Whatever exists, that's what he's talking about. How did it get here, and why is it here? So you still come back to the same thing. And I think that's an excellent way to answer the objection. Here's another objection that he deals with, I think, very well also. This particular objection deals with time or infinity. The idea being that wherever we are today, whatever this reality is that we're looking at, is simply a result of prior states of reality. And that prior state goes back into infinity, like I had mentioned in that little drawing that I was thinking. You know, I got to draw stuff. When I'm reading these books, I got this book where I just draw stuff and make pictures, because these ideas, again, I don't have a brain for these kinds of ideas. So I do those drawings to help me understand it. And hopefully maybe that might help somebody else kind of get what we're talking about. But the idea that reality goes back into infinity, the objection would be is we can't really explain this reality, whatever this is, because it's a result of an infinite number of past realities. That would be the objection. So how does Dr. Rasmussen answer that particular objection? So he starts and says, how does time play in? Could an earlier state of the universe cause the current blob of everything? If so, then principle 2 is false. He's talking about the principles, and he illustrates, or he writes out the principles that he's talking about earlier in the chapter. And so you can read in that part if you want to take a look at them. I did it on the other video, but I don't want to make this too long. But he says, if so, principle 2 is false. Something outside the current blob of everything is its cause. If it's a cause of the prior state of reality, then that prior state of reality would be the cause of the current state reality. So then Dr. Rasmussen adjusts his idea or clarifies his idea to encompass the new data. And what does he say? I must clarify then that the blob of everything does not merely include all of current reality. It includes all things at all times. For example, suppose a spatio-temporal universe exists. Then the blob of everything includes every temporal slice in the spatio-temporal universe. So when I say that the blob of everything has no outside cause, I mean that there is never anything or any things beyond the blob of everything, time inclusive. The result is independent theories of time. This result is independent theories of time. Now, in some theories, the past is not real, while in others, the past is as real as the present. If the past is not real, then the past cannot be the real cause of reality. If, on the other hand, the past is real, then all reality includes the past. Either way, nothing is outside of all reality. So, very simple idea. It works with all sets of data, and apparently this works. Whatever you're talking about, slices of time, no reality in the past, infinite universe, it all works with his theory. All he's saying is that whatever exists, one bird at a time, flock of birds, little things, big things, doesn't matter. He's saying this blob of everything includes everything that exists. So whatever you come up with, that's included in the blob. Pretty simple. That's why I think it's a fantastic idea. Not only is it a simple idea, but it works in concordance with all other data sets. And I think he's on to something. But again, we still have the whole book to get through if you can hang in there. But I simply wanted to illustrate this. The biggest part of an idea, it seems to me, is not just the idea, but how it works with the rest of the idea. And this gets into this thing that I'm not quite sure I understand, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. But there's this idea called the correspondence theory of truth. And I think that that's what I'm going with. Because the other one is sort of a, I don't remember the name of it, but it's a different idea that really depends on how one idea connects with another idea in sort of a network of idea things, which I don't quite think is the right way to go, but don't ask me. But for me, the correspondence theory of truth is something that seems right to me. And the idea, I think, is that there is some reality out there, and the truth of my statements or my beliefs are the truth value of my statements or beliefs depend upon how well they correspond to objective reality out there. So if I say that, there's a blue chair on top of the table, then that's only true if there's a table and there's a chair and the relationship is such that the chair is on top of the table, then I'm saying something that's true. So what I'm saying corresponds to something out there in reality. And that's how I think that's how I think is the best way to understand reality. That's just me. And I think on that basis, these ideas, the one that Dr. Rasmussen is putting forward, I think works very, very well. So that's going to be it for this time. I don't want to get any further in that. Thanks for tuning in. The next time we will continue in on this book and some of the ideas. But what I want to focus on for the next couple of sessions is just how to deal with challenges to your idea, because that seems to be, I don't want to say the most important, but it's a huge part. And I think that many people who come up with ideas come up with an idea because it sounds cool or they like it at the beginning. But then as challenges come up, they're not very good at dealing with the challenges. Either they haven't thought about it very well, or whatever challenge comes to them, they just ignore it because it threatens their idea. And they love the idea, so they just ignore the challenge to the idea. One of those things that happens. But that's what we're going to be focused on in the future. So thanks for tuning in. I appreciate you showing up again. And I really appreciate the support you guys are giving. And we're getting new folks signing up all the time. And I appreciate that. Hopefully you get some value out of this. But at the same time, I love your questions and I love your responses. Because again, I'm not telling you that I'm right. I'm just looking at some ideas that might work. But anything you have out there that I could learn from or be corrected about, I'm open to hear from. So thanks for tuning in. We'll come back next time, and that's enough out of me. All right, get out of here. That's it.